Thanks for being here. Good choice. Cold morning, wasn't
Yep, yep.
it? Apparently. Just a couple of with the government has been saying, or people have been saying that like as from the 1st of July, there's been relaxation of some of the restrictions, but we're still bound by the 4 square metre rule with people being in a facility. So according to the space here, we can only have 30 or so people. So that's still in force until the government changes it. And also, so that means for us, and also it's limited to outside gatherings and people getting together. And so what that means for us as a church is that we've had some small groups that operate through the week, particularly on Tuesday afternoons, well, they won't be happening until further notice. Unfortunately, that's just what it is. But at the same time, there's things that we can't do, but there's heaps of things that we can do.
Yeah.
You can go and have cuppas with people, you can invite people out to have a cuppa and coffee or tea, meet somewhere as long as you social distance, you know, this thing. You go to the park with someone, you can invite people to your house. There's heaps of things that we can do that still develop relationship and keep our community going. So I encourage you just to focus on the things we can do and not the things we can't do. It might be a little bit odd, some of the things we can't do, like coming to church and not being able to sing, being like that for millennia, like we've been able to sing songs for millennia, I suppose, but not at the moment. Well, we can sing, but we can't. Not as loud as I normally would. So we're just going to, I just asked Robert if he would pray for us as we go into the time of the word. Thanks, Robert. If you would, buddy.
Lord, we just pray that as Graham brings forth the word this morning, Lord, that it'll be inspired by the Holy Spirit, which I know it is. Lord, and we pray that the word will sink deep into our spirits, Father God. It'll minister to us. It'll quicken things in our lives. It'll bring back things that we've maybe read and heard before. They'll just minister life to us and life more abundantly. We thank you for that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thanks so much. So what we're going to continue on. We've read that passage of scripture, and I'm going to take a portion out of that, and then I'm going to reduce it down to take out probably just one verse and maybe even one phrase out of the verse that really spoke to my heart this week, and it spoke to me. So I'm just going to share some of the things that I've learned in the midst of that, if that's okay. So the intention of the message is to protect and to prepare. Fair enough? And so we read that verse, but we're going to read, I just want to hone in on 1 Timothy chapter 6 we're reading, and we're going to look at verses 6 to 10. And it says this in the NIV version, it says, "But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs." And as I was reading this, I don't know about you, when you read the Bibles, I find that when I read the Bible, you know, like we've read 12 verses this morning, and then I've brought it down to 5, and then we're going to go down a little bit further, and perhaps something just stands out for me. So perhaps even as Christine was reading the passage, perhaps something stood out to you in the midst of that passage. Anyone want to volunteer anything as you're listening to Christine? Did anything speak to anyone?
Be content.
Be content. Yep.
I think you can enjoy what you can do with money.
Yep.
Yeah. If you're doing the right thing.
Yep. So we should go clubbing this week and pick up a bird's eye. No, that's right. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Love of money, and I don't have that real love of money. That's why it's the root of all
Yeah, right. But also as you read a passage, like Donna said, contentment, you get a hint of what he's talking about, because if there's a word or a phrase or a theme that's kind of repeated you know that's what he's talking about. And I think in that passage, he mentions contentment a couple of times. But the phrase that gets me is, and so we listen to that. Let's, you know, let me read it again. But godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. So I would contend that Paul's writing to Timothy, and he's concerned about those people who have wandered from the faith through the love of money. And if you remember, we've talked about this before, but if you remember some of the teaching of Jesus, Jesus said something similar in Matthew chapter 6. He says this, Matthew chapter 6 verses 20 to 24 we're going to read. It says, this is Jesus speaking. He says, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and vermin do not destroy, where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body is full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? And then he says in verse 24, Jesus still speaking, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And it might sound a little bit odd where the first section he's talking about money, the second section he's talking about money, but then in the middle section he's talking about the eyes. And so, but in what the meaning is that when it's talking about the eye is the lamp of the body, if your eyes are healthy, what he's talking about there is that if you're generous, then your whole body is going to be full of light. But if you're stingy, you're going to be full of darkness. So it's still talking about money, okay, or the love of money. But for me, as I was reading it, verse 10 was the kicker for me. In 1 Timothy 6 it says, for the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. And that last phrase, pierced themselves with many griefs, that's what really struck out to me. And I want to investigate that this morning. And what I want to bring is things that will protect us from that happening to us. That's the intention. And it's things that I've learned personally, and I want to share it with you. So pierce themselves. Have pierced themselves through comes from a Greek word, those, periperion, whatever, around completely to pierce, to put on a spit. When I say that, what do you think of?
Like a pig.
Pig. One of the other things that I think of is the thing where they cut the kebab. You got the thing right, like same thing as pierce, right? Transfixed, met, to pierce, to wound deeply. And so people, what happens is that the love of money draws people away from, when Jesus also talked about that the cares of the world will come in and choke the life out of people's faith and their relationship with Jesus. I think it's similar to that. And it can also, well, let's do the next one. Let's just keep explaining. Pierce themselves through many sorrows. The word there signifies to be transfixed in every part. And then there's an allusion to one of those snares mentioned in Timothy, where a hole is dug in the earth. Can you picture it? Where a hole is dug in the earth, not a huge one, or can be, and filled with sharp stakes, and being lightly covered over with turf or leaves, is not perceived or not seen, and whatever steps on it falls in and is pierced through with these sharp stakes. The many torments mentioned by the apostle. So you get the sense that even just people getting consumed by the love of money and the cares of the world can fall into what the picture that comes to my mind is a booby trap. I don't know if you ever watch World War II movies or Vietnam War movies, where they kind of, maybe Vietnam more than anything, where you see, or even some ancient movies that talk about ancient times, and where they'll dig a hole, put stakes in it, cover it over, and sometimes it'll just be like that deep, so it just severely wounds the person's foot or feet. But other times you see where they dig a whole big pit and put big posts in it, same thing. So when you fall in, you're killed instantly. But it's still a booby trap. It's covered over, so you're just walking along, and the next minute, boom, you trip over and you're in the thing, and you're wounded. So you pierce themselves. So the next one, thanks Ron. And also in that they're led astray. And one of the things I really like about that, the definition is that they're led astray, properly led someone astray away from where they belong, or where they properly belong. Focuses back on to the cause, to the source of strain, wandering that connects to the needless pains arising from it. That's one thing's right. So the picture that I get, I don't know about you, but the picture that I get out of that is that those things that are a concern, the love of money, the concerns of life, can be like a booby trap that are set up and that are set up deliberately to trap us, to harm us. But the other picture that I get, and perhaps you can explain this, Neville, the other picture that I get is a nose ring through a bull. Because we're talking about 1 Timothy, where he talks about the love of money carries people away, and so the picture that I get is that if we're fully engrossed and we've got this concern that we want money no matter what the cost, and so who's actually in charge? And so I suspect that when they have the nose ring in the cattle and they connect a rope to it, they can just lead the bull or the cow or the beast wherever they want to go. Is that right?
That's right, guide him.
Yeah.
Keep him from harm's way.
Yeah, and so that's the other picture that I get. You got the picture of the booby trap, but also you can get the nose ring where the love of money will just lead you wherever the power of the money wants to take you. And invariably, as we read, it'll take us away not only from our relationship with Jesus, or could do, but it says it leads to all kinds of evil. Led by the nose. And the other thing is, as we read in the word study, the other picture that I get is a pig on a spit. Now, I don't know about you, but I suspect if the pig was alive and was on the spit, it would be really, really uncomfortable. Things would be hot, you know what I mean? But it's got no, like, it had either all of these pictures. There's no control. The victim, it has no control, and so it just really speaks to me. So I just it just intrigued me, the phrase. So that's some of the thoughts out of that. But just some of the things that I reckon could help us to beat that, to protect ourselves from that. And that might not even be you. It might be some people that you may know that you think, oh, you know, or you could be praying for. But one of the things that I've put in my life is, and I want to suggest that you consider these, is the next one. Thanks, Ron. Is to learn to master your money. For you to master it, not it to be your master. And so we can do that. And I think there's 5 simple ways of mastering your money. Budget, 5-letter word. Give, deal with debt, save, and live simply. Whatever that relative, that might be different. That might be relative to you, different to someone else. Okay, that's not me imposing. Oh, you should be like, no. It's relative to you and your walk with God. And budget. Budget, give, deal with debt. Now we're going to be talking about principles here that I think would add to our life if we learn these things and master them. But I understand people's lives too. And there might be a season where you're all in the midst of something, maybe you've got debts, and I want to confess to you that our household, we had personal debt up till last year. We still have a mortgage, we're paying off a house, but up to then we had credit card debt, we had personal loan debt, and we'd had that for quite a while, did we not?
Some of it.
Yeah, but we still have personal debt. But in the midst of that, I learned, took seriously the admonition and to give, and for me what that meant is that I up until then I kind of had a bit of an issue with tithing, wasn't quite sure about it, but decided no, read a book, read the scriptures, decided yes, that's right, and put that into practice, and when I did that, started tithing, giving first fruits to the local church, and to God in that way, then we were given money, debts were paid, and as a result of that, like you can talk about coincidence, but as soon as we started doing that, budgeting, learning budgeting, and then giving out of that, God dealt with our debts. And we had to too, because like if I'm given money, I could choose to go and spend it. I didn't have to pay off my debts. But no, we just thought, no, this is what we think God's saying. And so that's what we did. Like I've put these things into practice. Learn to save and live simply. And so there's verses at the back. I just want to give you some verses that I think back up those thoughts. Luke 14 says, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying this person began to build and wasn't able to finish. Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king, won't he first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he is not able, he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off and will ask for terms of peace. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples. Now, I know that's talking about other things, but to me that's just sitting down and analysing and thinking, I've got this much, and that's how I use it. And we call that a budget. You can find out where money's going, and then you can start managing it. We need to sit down and be aware, yes, this is what I've got to come in, and this is what I've got to go coming out, and then going out's got to be less than what's coming in. Is that fair enough? Mm-hmm. So I just, the principle's the same. Giving. Proverbs 3 verse 9 says, honour the Lord with your wealth and with the first fruits of all your crops. And then Paul says to Timothy, in the same chapter we're reading, but a bit further on, it says, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, not to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to be good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. I think that's, for me, that's a no-brainer. And dealing with debt, Proverbs 22:7 says, the rich rule over the poor. The borrower is slave to the lender. And again, as you listen to that, I get the picture of the bull with the nose ring being led around by the borrower well, they owe money to the other person and they've got to pay it off, otherwise they'll be in trouble. So the borrower is slave to the owner. The rich rule over the poor. And so I know there's some debts you've got to have. I'm not going to say, but if you can manage it and manage it well, and if you can alleviate as much personal debt as possible, the better off you are, I would think. That'd be fair enough. But if you have businesses or a mortgage, different thing altogether. But then you can go too far with both those things, can you not?
You're never working for yourself if you have too much debt.
Hey?
You're never working for yourself. You're working for somebody else.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. That's right.
Another thing about Proverbs 10 verses 4 and 5 says, lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. He who gathers crops So gathers crops, and I think I want to suggest this is just a hinting or talking about saving. He who gathers crops in summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps during harvest is a disgraceful son. And if you think about an agrarian society, if they just harvested what they had and just consumed it straight away, but they had to save it. They had to save it for that season or till the next crop. So you've got to save to survive. And I think saving, and then it then starts to empower us in our finances as well. And simplicity. 1 Thessalonians says this in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, and in fact you do love all of God's family throughout Macedonia, yet we urge you, brothers and sisters, to do so more and more, and to make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. You should mind your own business and work with your hands, just as we told you, so that your daily life might win the respect of outsiders, and so that you will not be dependent on anyone. But I really like the fact there it said, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. You should mind your own business and work for your hands, just as we told you, and so that your daily life may win respect of outsiders. I think simplicity. Now that's relative, that's different from person to person. Like I'm allowed to have a 85 inch plasma TV. Just sit there in my recliner, electric recliner. No, anyway.
Into the chair.
So master your money, or are we going to finish off with this one? Rule your riches. You be the boss. And I think one of the things about giving also, one of the things that I find for me is that if I give to the local church, I give to other people, I give to our missions. But when I give, I think it affirms the fact that me and my income are reliant on God.
Yeah.
It affirms that. It's actually me making a choice. I could take this and keep it and spend it, but no, God, I recognise that you're the king and that my supply is from you, and I do this in recognition of that. And also, and what Jesus said, that if we are generous and we give, then we're actually storing treasures in heaven, are we not? And do we believe that we're going to get to heaven one day?
Yes.
Well, guess what's going to be? There's going to be stuff waiting for us. So, rule your riches. The other one that I want you to consider as well is to rest and recreate. Or recreate. Genesis 2 says this, by the seventh day God had finished the work he had been doing, so on the seventh day he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. What would we call that? Sabbath. We don't have to use that. We can use the Australian version of it. Have a day off. Or have a couple of days off. But have a day off.
Recharge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rest and recharge or recreate or recuperate, but rest. Exodus 20 verse 8 says, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Really need a really good biblical scholar. Who can tell me what the reference is with the 10 Commandments?
Exodus 20. Exodus 20. You got it up there.
Got it.
Go on.
So I'm going to read the 10 Commandments to you. And just this is the 10 Commandments, and it says, the number one, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. You shall have no other gods before me. That's good advice, is it not? You shall not make for yourselves an idol in the form of anything in heaven above or on the earth below, so don't make any idols. That's good advice. Do not misuse or do not profane the Lord's name. That's good advice, is it not? So would we practice that? Like,
Takes a lot of practice.
yeah.
Does.
But we would say they're valid things to encourage people to live by. Is that fair enough?
Yeah.
Exodus 20 if you want, or Deuteronomy somewhere.
Exodus 20 is.
Honour your father and mother so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God has given you. And I think that's a good thing to do, honour your mother and father, because when you want to be a mum and dad, well, you'd want to be honoured too. The next one, you shall not murder. That's really good advice. You shall not commit adultery. That's really good advice. You shall not steal. Really good advice. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbour, so don't lie or don't bear false witness. And you shall not covet your neighbour's household, or your wife, or their wife, or his manservant or maidservant, his ox. So don't compare yourself to others and want to keep up with the Joneses, it's saying. And I'd encourage anyone to live by those, well, they could talk principles or commands, fair enough. But I missed one.
Yeah, you did.
That's only 9 of them. The fourth or fifth one is remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And I think in our Western culture, we think, oh no, that's all right. With agriculture, I can use chemicals and fertilisers. I don't have to, whatever, fallow paddocks or do whatever. Or I can keep working and saving up for running, whatever, you know what I mean? I think our lifestyle, we can kind of think I've got to get to pay for the lifestyle I want. But in the midst of all those commands, which I think were really, really good principles by which to live, in the midst of that, he says, remember the Sabbath day and to keep it holy. I think, well, and if God has a day off, then perhaps we should have a day off too. Luke 6:5 says this, it says, and Jesus said to him, the Son of Man, he just healed a guy on the Sabbath and they were going crook about it. And Jesus said to him, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. And I was thinking about that, and my understanding is that Jesus didn't abolish the Sabbath. He may have redefined it a little bit. He may have taken some of the rigidity of religion out of it, because he would heal people, and he'd admonish the people that were going crook because he was healing people. If you had an animal that fell into a pit on the Sabbath, wouldn't you go and pick it up and rescue it? And so he might have redefined it, but I don't see him abolishing it. So I'd encourage us to consider having a day off.
Yeah, you don't invent a job. You just do what has to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you go to the beach, or go fishing, or take your wife shopping, or... So, and I think also us having a day off, or us having time off, also, in my opinion, also reaffirms the fact, no, God, you're my supply.
Yeah.
I don't have to kind of, and I'm going to go back to what I said at the start. I know there's people in seasons that maybe have to do certain things in certain times and certain periods, but I'm talking about aimed at having a lifestyle that reflects this. And if we can, that's great. And if we can't at this moment, well, that's just what it is. And I'm not trying to be in condemnation and saying you have to, but this is something that I think I want to encourage people to aim for. Have a lifestyle that reflects this. So we rule our riches, and we reflect and we rest and recuperate or recreate. Just a simple one, I think. And so the whole point is to not to fall into the trap of the love of money. And I think if we say, no, I'm not working today, I could be working and earning $400 or $2,000, whatever it is relative to you, but it's pulling back and saying, no, I'm more than that.
Mm.
And also in the midst of it, I want to affirm that God's my supply.
Yeah.
And He's my King. And if it's good enough for Him, perhaps it's good enough for me. And the last one I want to bring to you as well, and we've talked about this a little bit out of what we've been listening to, but 1 Timothy 6 says, 6:6 says, but godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world and we can take nothing out of it. We can't take it with us, but it will go ahead of us. Didn't we say that if you store riches up in heaven, then lost it?
Yeah.
But godliness with contentment is great gain. Again, in Hebrews 13:5 it says, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has says, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. That's the writers of the Hebrews saying that. In Philippians says this, Paul writing to the church at Philippi says, I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in poverty or in want. Whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. And one of the things you notice about that with Paul, he's talking about contentment, but he also says, I have learned the secret of being content in any and every circumstance or situation. I have learned it. So there must have been a time in Paul's life when he wasn't content with anything, perhaps. Fair enough? So I'm going to aim to make this a part of my lifestyle. I'm going to aim to make this a part of who I am. That I'm going to be content in the midst. It doesn't matter what's happening out there. I'm going to be content in here. And I don't know about you, but I find that a little bit difficult personally, if I think about it, because what's been happening in our world for the last 3 or 5 months is sometimes the kind of thoughts of that can kind of come in and start robbing me in here. And so I've got to kind of be really intentional about this and just, no, it's okay. I know God's with me. I know God's in control. And so it's learning to be, I suppose the other word that comes to mind, like even now I'm just thinking about the cow with the nose ring. If I don't be content and get anxious about all these things, I'm being led around again by the nose ring, am I not?
Yeah.
About, I've got this fear here, and I've got this fear here, I've got this fear here, and I can be anxious about that, and depressed about that, and I'm being led around again. It's okay. It's learning to be content in here, and the word that comes to mind is perhaps is peace. And the other word, and the word study would about contentment would say this is that I'm sad. It doesn't matter what's happening. Like Paul said, whether I'm well fed or hungry, whether I'm living in plenty or in want. He says, either way, I'm satisfied because I know. He says one thing that Christ is with me, but then he says because Christ is with me, I can do all things. I can face all things. And still be satisfied, or still be content, or still be at peace in here. And if we can be content and don't have to compare ourselves to others, or be striving to have things to kind of make us feel more than what we are. Because that's what one of the lures of the love of money would be. Oh, I won't be happy until I have an XR6 Falcon.
3-story house.
Or a 3-story house, or a swimming pool in the backyard, or I can go overseas for holidays twice a year, whatever it is. And if you can do that without being, if you can do that, then good luck to you. That's great.